Hey Svet,
Hey, how are you?
can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Beautiful.
You?
Ye-
Awesome.
Yes, very sorry, I'm just opening the score here. So our thought, and tell me also what would be the best way to both record it in terms of the instruments that we should start with, that then we can layer on top of that. I
Yeah.
feel I feel like it's a little bit easier to do that first, and I will ask Stacy for the MIDI, but I have to hear it first to see how much it makes sense,
Uh-huh.
the
Okay.
meaning. As you see, looking at the piece, it's not terribly difficult
Hmm.
in terms of putting it together. I think
Yeah.
if people have the right pulse and they feel this way, then it should make sense.
Yes, yes.
So my thought at the very beginning was to do the piano and harp to start with, and timpani. you
Okay.
know even the percussion, the crotales and the tubular bells, to do this, because these chords, which you will see in the piece, Stacy put them 19 times to represent the passage, the 19th amendment, right? So
Yeah.
these things happen 19 times,
Mhm.
which is really beautiful. And I think if we lay this as the first track,
Mhm.
right, then I think this, together with the click track in the background, should be pretty solid for the musicians, right?
Yes, yes. Sure. I mean, I absolutely agree with you. And just to tell you, if we hear that somebody is slightly off at a certain place, we can very gently separate their video and their audio at that moment and just adjust them very slightly so that we can, if we hear something that's a major imperfection, we can address it after we layer everything on top of one another. Because it's possible and it's most likely that, people not being in the same room, you will hear some of this. It's just normal.
Yeah. Tell me, because I haven't even thought about this, but how are we going to be able to make sure that everyone is in tune? We're going to have to make sure that all the instruments are tuned at the same pitch, right? Like this is we.
Yes. Well, yes, this is why I was suggesting that we put some sort of very soft media underneath it, because that would literally be almost like the psychological compass of everyone. Not only for the sake of content of the piece and context, but also just to keep some sort of level of connection with both pitch and timing and phrasing. Because you're right, otherwise it's really difficult to know and to make sure that people are tuning in chords, especially chords.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
What do
Okay.
you think of that?
Well, I thought, because the piece relies so much on these really long pedal tones,
Mhm.
I felt like if we record like the harp and piano, which like resonate, this D
Yeah.
chord that resonates so often. Um, it's not very low, but it resonates often, and then hopefully people can really tune into that. And then, of course, we will decide. We should all say, okay, we need to make sure that all the instruments tune to 441 or 440 or whatever it is that we decide. It will depend on some of the instruments that we have at home. Like, I don't know, is it pretty standard that the tubular bells and the crotales are tuned at 440? Or with crotales you have no idea,
Right.
right?
Exactly. And there's so many harmonics in these instruments that I would not necessarily worry about them,
Okay.
in a sense of their pitch because of the harmonics. And in that sense, I wonder whether actually I'm also looking here at the fact that there is a lot of violin music, a lot of string music. If, for example, it begins with sustained pitch
Yeah.
in both marimba and there is, I think, viola and cello that
Yeah.
have this. I wonder whether it may be a wise option to just have these drones that just keep going to be added early on.
That's what I'm saying, so that we have this. No, what I'm saying is that this is a very high pitch, right? Because it's harmonics on the viola and the cello, so it'll be a thin pitch rather than a bass line. So we have this drone, but it's okay, because at the beginning, it's just the flutes that need to figure out this AD thing, which I don't think it's going to be a problem.
Okay.
um, you know so I think what I want to avoid is, I want to avoid the first and second violin lines, starting in measure 3. I want to avoid this from sounding non-musical, just
Mhm.
because they're following with click track and they're trying to play in time. This is actually supposed to be very, very expressive and beautiful, you know.
This is, you're absolutely on. This is why I was, I'm thinking that if we have some sort of a MIDI, I can put, if it's very dry, I can put actually some reverb on it just to give it a sense of space.
Okay.
And that would, I think, give people just a little bit more of context, and we can make it as loud as or as soft as we want. So the idea that I had is that maybe we can have the click track being the loudest, but I'm not going to make the click be really percussion, kind of going like, to where you listen to it and you go like, how am I supposed to play musically with this robot in my mind, but just to where there's still enough space for them to feel like they're not pressed by these click track sounds,
Right.
but it's almost subtle enough where they can hear it easily, but underneath it, almost as if it's a suggestive layer, there's just enough of the MIDI. So if someone says, okay, how is it supposed to sound if I was playing with anybody else? They'll just have that psychological idea, but it would never overwhelm them to where they cannot play and hear themselves well. And
Okay.
I think that would solve two issues. One would be some of that idea of slight amount of freedom where you want it, and also of pitch, because the MIDI is in pitch, in tune, and so basically people will be able to tune to that because they'll hear it. And we can
Okay.
make three different levels of volume if you wish. We can give people, it's very easy to do, 2 or 3 different versions where sometimes the MIDI is really loud, so you can hear it almost the same volume as the click, and one that's just a little softer, so people can choose which one they want.
So I will ask Stacy for a MIDI because she told me that she had a MIDI, but we didn't really discuss about sharing it. So I will ask her about this. I mean, I'm sure it'll be fine. I don't suspect it won't, but sometimes composers don't want to share a MIDI just because they feel like it's horrible based on what's in their head, until you have the
Right,
real
right,
instrument.
right, right.
It's really
Of
hard to
course.
make it sound good.
And I hear you, and I think this is why we can just make sure people realize why we're adding it and explain that this is not for them to think of this as being the piece itself, but just as a major reference point that can help the fact that we're not in the same room, both in tune, especially in tune when you talk about it, and also just as a musical context. I think no one would argue this, and again, we'll beautify it a little bit.
Yeah. Great. So, the next issue that it's, of course, the narration. And what I have asked, what we're looking at, we don't have yet the narrator set, but what I'm thinking is we will have the narrator record each box
Mhm.
as it is, as an individual thing.
Yes,
So
yes.
then we can splice it in at the end wherever it makes sense, right, in the
Sure,
music.
sure,
So
sure.
I think this is the easiest way to do it, rather than the narrator do one track where they try to listen to the music and try to match it up. That sounds impossible to me, especially with a narrator that is not. We don't know who we will have, so I don't know if it's going to be. I don't know. So I don't know if they know music, if they can tell. So it's more important to me and to Stacy is very important that the narration is delivered as like an actor rather than a politician reading a line that they don't really understand.
No,
You know?
of course. The only thing that I'm thinking of here is if you'd like them, if you'd like for all these gestures to be somewhat possible to align, one way to do it is we can calculate, for example, if quarter equals 69 in the beginning, about how long of a time would each of these gestures have, just as literally minutes or seconds, and just give them a relative idea and say, if you can speak this particular lines for not longer than this, then that would work out naturally to fit exactly where it's supposed to be.
Stacy and I talked about this, and not all of them. Like, do you see the ones that are, if I understand this correctly, so the ones that don't have an A, B, or C after the number in the
Uh-huh.
narration, those
Uh-huh.
are the ones that are supposed to happen where it's written.
Got
The
it.
like a 3A, B, for example, can sort of happen. Like B can happen not necessarily exactly where it's written, but somewhere around there.
Got it.
So we have time for A, for B. Like this can. The tricky part is at rehearsal B, right on page 9,
I'm just looking at
because
it.
that one she really wants. It was we the people, not we the white male citizens, not yet we the male citizens.
Yeah.
So this will have to time, but I think it'll be easier for us to time each box, right? And then what I've said about the fermatas, like at rehearsal B, is always to add 2 beats to each
Yeah.
fermata.
Yes.
So instead of being 3 beats, we'll make it 5.
Mhm.
And then if we need to, we can shorten this, right? Afterwards? Or,
Yes. Well, what I was going to suggest here is that what we can do, the trick is this: once we create a click track and people start recording themselves,
yeah.
it might be tricky at that point to adjust things, you know?
Exactly. That's why I'm saying that we should add, like in the fermata bar, instead of being 3 beats,
Yeah.
we should make a 5 click
Yeah.
bar.
Sure.
And then if this ends up being too long, as the fine, like after we've combined all the sounds together, we
Mhm.
layered everything together, and then if we put the narration then at the very end, then we say, okay, we need to reduce this by 2 beats. Then we can reduce the final musical track, right? We can reduce this,
Yes.
shorten it a little bit, right?
You can. The only question here is if you have a video, if people are also videoing themselves, that would look all of a sudden very strange.
I haven't
But
thought about that at all.
yes, that's one of the trickiest things about adding video to this. Is now, of course, uh, again, the way you could do this is such that maybe you kind of maybe here's what I'm going to ask you. Maybe we can be creative of how these images occur. So maybe you can take them away, and so when people play the chord, you can fade them out in darkness, and we have the narrator only on the page. Then we can fade him in again. So we can be very clever.
Or even just a text,
Right.
because it's so important for Stacy.
Exactly. So yes, we can. That's no problem at all. And what I was going to tell you is my idea is to create some sort of a back count for everybody so that they won't have questions for you. So when we make the click track, I would suggest to people to just listen one time, just the click, and follow the score. And what I'll do is I'll have audible cues. So if, say you go to letter B and there's a fermata, so the click would just go, black, black, right? And what I would have is I would say 3, 2, 1, and they would know that that's the next measure. See what I mean?
Excellent. That's
So they
amazing.
would understand what's going on. They will hear some sort of a audible cue.
One quick question while I'm thinking about it. So, if people have, like, for individual instruments, does everyone have to record? They don't, right? They don't have to record continuously, even if they're counting rests, right? Like they could record their thing if they know that it matches with the click track. Or would you rather have a recording line that, counts the 10 measures of rest, and then they come in, then they count 2 measures, and they come in again? What would be easiest?
The easiest would be that they give us one track and one part that has everything in it already, because otherwise it will be really tricky for us to kind of make sure that we line everything up. It would be a lot of different segments of music that have to line up. And I want to tell you something that probably will exclude from any potential sharing of this video. But for example, especially in the violins, etc., if we hear that somebody's a little out of tune, the fact that we see them play doesn't mean they have to. So that's how we can also tune things up a little bit. There's instruments where that's not possible, but say if you have a few trombones and they're creating a chord together, it's hard to tune that. But say if you have violins, if we hear something that's slightly off, we can definitely make it hidden. But the good news is that also there is slight amounts of ways to alter pitch if we hear someone being not exactly with the rest of the ensemble, because the good news in this case is everybody's recording by themselves,
One
and
millimeter.
so you
Yeah.
have one sound, and a lot of the times it's a singular pitch, which is the only way you can really easily actually edit pitch. So if worst comes to worst, we'll do that. But I think that having one full take of this will be ultimate. And if they say hey, I'm giving you say 3 or 4 large chunks, but still they're going through everything, would still be okay. See, like we're talking about these fermatas and people may be cutting up, I think that's fine, because I know that everybody probably will feel good about certain takes
Mhm.
rather than a whole 15 minutes of music.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But maybe that's a way for us to compromise it, give them a little space, but still not make it to where we're getting, say you get like 15 passages from trombones, and you have to go literally make sure you fit them all in.
Hmm. And they have to understand that it's not such a huge. Let me. My son is in the eye here, but it's not such a huge problem if let's say the violins are playing and they've recorded a 10-minute track that it's really spectacular, and then they play one note wrong or something like this. That's
Yeah,
less of a
exactly.
problem. We can adjust it easier than them trying to do a patch into the thing.
Correct. If it's someone who is a one and only one instrument, and they know that because they're looking at the score, and they mess up, we cannot edit that.
Right.
And that's why I think if we give people I was going to suggest maybe we can really almost pre-produce this a little bit. And, I really highly suggest that we do that, where we actually sit down and before we send anything to the orchestra, we discuss together a few of these very specific details, like big cuts, like how would you like the fermatas to be handled when it comes to the narrator. And that would help us really, I think, understand how to instruct the musicians to also think of how to record this. And so if, for example, they want to cut, we can tell them where they really have space. And I think having this piece sort of split into 3 or 4 chunks, which seems to be very easy and doable, will be perfectly fine. And so if they send this to us basically, and we tell them that they need to name it, say, violin 1, give the name, and then section 1, 2, 3, or 4, and then we're going to know who that is, what instrument it is, and we'll be able to line this up.
Perfect.
Yeah. But I suggest, highly suggest that when you're comfortable with the MIDI and when you speak with Stacy and you look at the score and you listen to the MIDI and you feel good about everything, that we literally find the chance to communicate and pre-produce everything about what we would sort of want to do as a final product, and then figure out how to get to it. So sort of saying, how do you see this be at the end, and how do we need to tell people to record to get there? You know what I'm saying?
Yep, I understand.
Look at the final project before we actually get into this, because that would help us foresee exactly the things we talk about, like video or the narrator freedom and flexibility and all sorts of fermatas, things like that.
So just as I'm making a list here, so the first is MIDI, and address this with Stacy.
Yeah.
Then I will share this. I will share this with you. Maybe we'll even have a quick meeting between Stacy and you and I, and the 3 of us can listen to the MIDI together and then see what's possible. And then maybe we give you the time to then create a click track after that and make all those decisions. And then we bring in the orchestra at the end and we listen to it together. We can listen to it once with the MIDI and with the click track at the same time, so that everyone sees how this works.
Right. And if we feel like, when we discuss this, 3 of us, if we feel like it's perfectly justified that we split this piece into a few sections, then maybe we don't even give one giant click track, but we actually give 4 different sections. And we are just comfortable knowing that at those very moments where people are cutting and they're starting a whole new recording, we are certain that the narrator is going to be on the screen and they're going to be taking all the space visually and audibly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's great. Yeah. Easy does it.
Cool. So then let's just go a little bit. So the only thing is at the very end, Stacy wants that last, because the idea is the last chord, right? That last hit on measure 443,
right,
is the 19th chord, and she wants this to be as long as possible. So I think given that it's not all the instruments the way that she orchestrated, it's very easy to hold this. So we can make that click track. We can decide that instead of being 6 beats, for those 2 measures, I don't know, we can make it 22 beats or something like that, so that you can always taper it at the end if it's necessary, if it's too long, and then it can be a really beautiful, a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, of course. And actually, one thing that I could recommend to you, in my experience, is actually I would not even recommend that we use click track there, because what happens is when people are sustaining a note and they hear beat, it always interferes with their breath. One thing I would say here is that basically we just tell everybody, when you're going over the whole score with the orchestra, say hold this as long as you can, and for string instruments, just say hold this at least, say 15 seconds. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Because this way psychologically no one feels any sort of literally like bumps in their ears while they're trying to sustain something so beautiful and lyrical. Yeah. Of course, if you want it, I'm happy. Maybe we can even make it very, very, very soft or something. The click can just change volume dramatically if you want it.
Yeah. Excellent. Sure. Hey, Svet.
Hey, Cristi, how are you?
Good. How are you, boss?
I'm doing okay. I will share my screen with you.
Okay.
What here is basically the blue line with sound waves is basically the piece, the sound file. And above it is, if you see, there is a thin line that has numbers. Those are the tempi.
Yeah.
And we wanted to check with you. So I'll just play a little bit so you can kind of tell what goes on. So I'll kind of move to where some of the tempi changes start. So here. Basically, that's what people hear. And, you know, when tempo changes, this is what happens. Which is fine, right?
Yeah.
So I will send this for your perusal. I just had questions about a few particular things. So if you notice, for example, here, I'm going to slide forward just a little bit.
Yeah.
This is, and you know, everything is done by measure number. So at the moment, for example, I'm at the measure number 134 going to 135. There is accelerando here. And those sections, you talked about them speeding up, right?
Yeah.
Well, just so you know, at the moment I've done the click track exactly following the MIDI that I have. So I will play you just a little bit before letter D. So I'm at the moment at measure 133.
Yeah. We're
And
looking at it.
you're going to hear how this happens. So what I want you to see here in the numbers, and it's so funny how that's why they say the numbers don't lie. In order to really create a realistic click track to the music, if you notice, even though the tempo at D is 90, what is it? I think at D is, let's see, 102.
102. Yeah.
Right, but do you see how the accelerando goes literally to quarter equals 130 in
Yeah.
order to really make that happen? So the reason I'm pointing that out is because accelerandi are just a little bit ahead of the tempo where actually we end up. So listen to what that feels like. That's only according to the MIDI. So here's, I'm going to start at 129 if you don't mind.
I got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Just making sure that you're comfortable with the fact that if you notice just before the tempo change, actually the click track goes faster. It does not go accelerando all the new tempo. It goes above that and then it drops.
Fine.
Fine. Okay, no problem. I wanted to point one more thing to you, so I'm going to stop the share so I don't keep scaring you with these graphs. Just so you know, currently what I've done to the MIDI is I've darkened it a little bit. I've added some reverb and some equalization, so it sounds just a little bit warmer. What I'm going to do after we finish now, I'm going to send you the whole file so you can just check it out.
Okay.
If you guys are comfortable, what I'll do is I'll add some, there's certain accelerandi or ritardanti that are very hard to predict. Like if you're listening to this and if you're not visually seeing, it's really hard to know. So what I'll do is I'll add some very quiet subdivisions so people could just know when they're what to expect. But I will do that after, if you don't mind, you and basically the composer just agree that this sounds good overall, that everything is fine.
Well, and my hope tomorrow at 2, or sorry, Monday at 2 o'clock your time, or 3 o'clock, I don't remember, whatever we decided, then, you know, maybe we can go through the whole score and you can, you know, like we all look at the score and then Stacy can make any notes and I make notes and I'll listen. Are you sending me is it an MP3 file? Or?
Yes, I'll send you just a simple MP3 file. And just so you know, I'm happy to also add some later on specifics that can make it easier for anybody to practice. So I can put an audible cues for every letter. So when people are playing, they can just sort of figure out where they are very easily, right? Because one of the things about practicing that's really hard is if you don't start from the beginning every time, you don't know where you are. I have to keep writing these times in and all that. I'll make it easier for people to know. And what I'll do eventually also is I'm going to make the click track. So right now, for example, I'll just show you this because I want to make sure that you're aware and you're okay with this. Currently, if you look at the visual, I'm going to, so if you look here where my mouse is, do you see how these sound waves are much thicker compared to say here at the end? That suggests volume. So the problem with these sticks is that currently when the sound waves are really sort of thick and the volume is high, notice how the click track and the volume of the MIDI sound great together. Even actually, I think the click is a little bit too soft. But then if you go to the very soft part of the audio, the click sounds too loud. You know? So what I'm going to do eventually when we agree on everything is I'm going to actually level the volume of the click with the music so that basically it's soft when music is a little bit more mild and people psychologically are calmer with that. They don't feel like someone is nailing and there's a woodpecker just right here. So we'll adjust all these. I just want to make sure you're aware that I'm doing these things. In case you hear something strange, know that I'm doing these things and I can adjust them super fast. And the final thing to tell you is about the fermatas. So currently the way that I did the fermatas is, and I'll prepare a quick set of notes for you guys of what are the time signatures for them, because clearly right now they're in the MIDI that I got, they're timed in a certain way. So what I've done is I've basically done the simplest thing, which is I've basically created time signatures that fit well with the durations that they have. The thing is that I wanted to bring to your attention, I sometimes read the text and I look at the durations we have and I'm not certain that's long enough. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. But tomorrow what I'll do is I'll prepare like a list of notes that say at different places what are the actual timings of the fermatas. And I wonder whether you may guys agree that for the score that the musicians get, so they know what they can expect, maybe we can even substitute the fermatas with time signatures, so that they can just understand what they're going to hear. Yeah. But let me see. Based on, let me just open the score very briefly and see if I can show you one idea.
196 is the first fermata. 196.
186. Hold on one second. I'm going right there.
96. Sorry, 196.
196. Sure. And I'll 196. Just looking for the measure number here. Okay, so yes, exactly. So I'm going to tell you what this is like. Basically, so I'm starting at 195, which is a measure of 3/4. Yeah. The way that I heard this and the way it's timed is 196 is a 4/4 and 197 is 7/8. And then we go back to 3/4. So here's 195 so you can check it out. I'm sorry, not going to hear this. Sorry, let me share my screen and audio. Forgive me. Here it is, 195. Make sense?
Yeah.
Sometimes I read the text, etc., and I just worry that might not give us enough time. But I wanted to just bring it to your attention, and maybe you guys can decide what makes sense when we check it out on Monday.
How are you doing the measure 230?
Here we go.
That's the one. I think that's probably the most dramatic change.
Sure. And you can even see what goes on here. Okay, so you could see, so basically here, this is very interesting. So if you, so I listened to this for a while and I realized that actually measure 231 actually starts slightly slower than the real tempo. The real tempo really comes in at 232. So here is, for example, I'll play for you, how about the 228 maybe, is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Here goes it.
Huh. Okay.
And what I was thinking to do in that silence is add like 3 notes that are just going to be different sounds that are going to help people realize what's the new tempo they can expect.
Yeah. And are you you were talking about something about adding a voice actually that says 3, 2, 1.
Yes. We can do that when there's enough time.
Okay.
Generally doing fermatas and things like this. I mean, here, I think only because it's a very narrow amount of space. I mean, let's check it out. If you did 1, 2, 3. So what I could do here, the problem is I can maybe take the click away here. So for example, watch this. At measure 230, I could take away the second beat of that click and instead just have something that says 1, 2, 3, and it's in time with what follows after.
Well, but the problem there is that's definitely not enough time for the voice.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
This is why
all the others are nothing. Right. I think all these fermatas we're going to have to increase them.
Yeah.
Is it easy for you to if she increases the time in her MIDI, is it like can you change it or do you?
Yeah, I'll basically she'll have to send me a different MIDI. I can't really easily manipulate these things in such a way like she can in
the original file.
Right, in that file. The score allows her to manipulate things in a different way than I can when I have an audio file.
Does it is this creating too much work for you? Should I just ask
No.
her to change it or no?
Well, I mean, I think that we should get, if when you hear this, if there are certain places that illuminate challenges, we can adjust them. Let's do it now. And even if I have to redo the click track, that's fine. Just because I think that would, solidify that the foundation of what we're doing will be solid.
Yeah. It might also be a place because that's sort of halfway through the piece, or like the first third to the piece. It might be a good place for a cut.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
You know,
for a long.
yeah. I mean, I think that any fermatas that basically do not have um, uh, technically any playing underneath them, I think we can make much longer.
Yeah.
But I think we should just tell people, okay, for example, if the fermata is currently 4 beats, let's make each fermata say like 8 beats or 10 beats, but
Mhm.
actually ask people to keep going. Because one thing I really worry about, Cristi, is getting a lot of files from people and sort of having to
Yeah.
sift through a lot of that stuff. What I was going to suggest actually is that people just send us 2 takes of the whole thing each. So and tell them, if I hear something that's wrong in one, I'll definitely look for it in the other.
Mhm.
And this way they'll have enough space in between these different cuts to kind of, even if they need to clean their instrument or, change something slightly, but they can just keep going, because I think that would help us just stay sort of focused on this. But I agree with you. I'd rather have the fermatas be longer, like much longer,
Yeah, and then
than
cut them
having
in
to,
later. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I'll send you this so you can hear it. That's what I wanted to ask you, because especially when when you hear it like this and you see the timing, you realize that it feels very urgent. Also, I noticed during some of the fermatas there is timpani tuning changes. I just wanted to make sure that actually maybe when we're done with the file, we think this is good. I wonder if we should send it to the musicians and just say, if anybody hears any issues, speak in the next 24 hours. Oh, hold your breath, please, unless you're a wind player, then you
Right.
can breathe.
Right. Okay, cool. So I will listen to the file that you send me, and then I will write my notes to Stacy as well, and then we meet on Monday, and I'll have my notes about this as
Got
well.
it. Okay, awesome. I'll send it to you in about 10 minutes.
Cool.
Julio, hey, so far so good.
Awesome. We're on our way.
Yep, we are. We are. Lots to go, but it's a big world. We can
Yeah.
walk. Can do
Cool.
it. Catch you soon.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
You too. Be well.